The dress felt like a noose around Theresa Turner's throat as she stood in the parlor of her father's house, watching through lace curtains as Victor Hollis stepped down from his carriage with that same calculated smile that made her skin crawl. It was June 1873 in Lincoln, Nebraska, and the summer heat seemed to mirror the suffocating pressure closing in around her life. In 3 days, she would become Mrs. Victor Hollis, bound to a man whose eyes held all the warmth of a winter grave, and whose hands she had seen strike his own horse hard enough to leave welts. Her father, Thomas Turner, had made the arrangement months ago, trading his only daughter for business connections and the promise of financial security. The fact that Victor was twice her age at 42, while she had just turned 21, seemed to matter little to anyone but herself. "Theresa, come greet your intended," her father called from the doorway, his voice carrying that edge of warning she had learned to recognize over the past months. Any protest, any hesitation would be met with cold disapproval and reminders of her duty as a daughter. She pressed her palms against the window frame, feeling the wood grain dig into her skin, and made a decision that would alter the course of her entire life. She would not marry Victor Hollis. She would not spend her days walking on eggshells, wondering when his temper would turn on her the way it turned on everything else in his path. She had seen the bruises on his housekeeper's wrist, noticed how the woman flinched when he raised his voice. Theresa knew with bone-deep certainty that she would rather die free than live as his possession. That night, after the house fell silent and her father retired to his study with his brandy, Theresa packed a small leather satchel with practical clothing borrowed from the laundry-maid's quarters. She left behind the silk gowns and delicate slippers that marked her as Thomas Turner's daughter, choosing instead a simple cotton dress in dusty blue, sturdy boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that would shield her face from recognition. She took what little money she had saved from household accounts, amounting to barely $30, and wrote a single line on a piece of paper she left on her pillow. "I cannot marry him. Forgive me." The clock struck 2 in the morning when she slipped out through the kitchen door, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might wake the entire household. The streets of Lincoln were dark and empty, lit only by a half-moon that cast long shadows across the dusty roads. She moved quickly toward the edge of town, knowing that once her absence was discovered at dawn, her father and Victor would come looking. Victor Hollis was not a man who accepted being denied what he considered his property, and she had no illusions about what would happen if he found her. She walked through the night, her feet following the westward road that led away from Lincoln and toward the open prairie. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, she had put several miles between herself and her old life. The landscape stretched out before her in rolling hills of tall grass that whispered in the morning breeze, and despite her exhaustion and fear, she felt something she had not experienced in months: hope. The small settlement of Ashford Creek appeared on the horizon around midday, a cluster of wooden buildings that served travelers moving through Nebraska territory. Theresa's throat was parched, her feet aching in boots that had not been made for such a journey. She counted her remaining money and decided she could afford a meal and perhaps information about work in the area. She could not keep running forever. She needed a plan, a way to support herself far enough from Lincoln that Victor's reach could not find her. The general store was a weathered building with a crooked sign that read Ashford Mercantile and Provisions. Theresa pushed open the door, wincing at the bell that announced her arrival. Inside, the air was cooler, scented with coffee beans and leather. An older woman with silver hair pinned in a neat bun looked up from behind the counter, her sharp eyes taking in Theresa's dusty appearance with one sweeping glance. You look like you have been walking through hell itself. Girl, the woman said, her voice matter-of-fact rather than unkind. Name's Martha Grayson. You lost or running? Theresa hesitated, then decided honesty might serve her better than lies in this moment. Running, she admitted quietly. I need work and a place to stay, somewhere I can earn my keep. Martha's expression softened slightly. Running from what? Law or a man who would become my husband against my will, a cruel man. Those are often the same thing, Martha said with a dry laugh. She studied Theresa for a long moment, then nodded toward the back of the store. I've got a room upstairs, nothing fancy. You can work here helping me with the store, stocking shelves, serving customers. Pay is not much, but it includes room and board. You good with numbers? Yes, madam. My father insisted I learn proper bookkeeping. Then you are hired. But girl, if trouble comes looking for you, I need to know. I am too old to be surprised by angry men with guns. Theresa felt tears prick at her eyes, the first kindness she had encountered making her defenses crumble slightly. His name is Victor Hollis. He is from Lincoln, a businessman with connections. He will come looking. Martha's mouth tightened into a thin line. Lincoln is 30 miles east. We will hope that is distance enough. In the meantime, you might want to think about changing your name while you are here. What should I call you? Theresa, she said, dropping a letter and her surname in one breath. Just Theresa. The first week passed in a blur of work and anxious glances toward the road. Theresa learned the rhythm of the store, memorizing prices and inventory, serving the cowboys and farmers and travelers who stopped in Ashford Creek. She kept her head down and her hat brim low, always aware that discovery could come at any moment. Martha proved to be a fair employer and an even better teacher, showing her not just how to run a store but how to read people, to spot trouble before it arrived. It was on the 8th day, a Thursday afternoon thick with humidity that promised rain, when Yates Thornton walked into the mercantile. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking pale blue, startling against his tanned face, and they held a directness that made Theresa's breath catch. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, his boots scuffed and his hands calloused, but he carried himself with quiet confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Afternoon, Martha," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried the easy warmth of familiarity. "I need supplies for the ranch. Got a list here somewhere." He patted his pockets, then pulled out a folded piece of paper with an apologetic smile. "Yates, you are always losing those lists," Martha said with affection. "This is Theresa, my new help. She will get you sorted. I need to check on a delivery out back." Theresa found herself alone with the cowboy, very aware of how his presence seemed to fill the small store. She took the list from his outstretched hand, their fingers brushing briefly, and felt an unexpected jolt of warmth at the contact. She cleared her throat and focused on the paper. Coffee, flour, salt, sugar, dried beans, ammunition for a Winchester lamp oil, she read aloud. "I can get all of this together for you. Will you be needing anything else?" "Maybe some of those peppermint sticks if Martha still keeps them," Yates said, leaning against the counter. "And I am curious about something. I have lived around Ashford Creek my whole life, and I know just about everyone who passes through. I have not seen you before." Theresa felt her guard snap up immediately. "I am new to the area, looking for work. Found it too, seems like. Martha is particular about who she hires." His tone was conversational, not probing, but Theresa remained wary. "You from Nebraska originally? Does it matter?" The words came out sharper than she intended. Yates raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "No offense meant. Just making conversation. It gets lonely out at the ranch sometimes. makes a man too talkative when he gets to town." His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes, and Theresa felt some of her tension ease. "I am sorry," she said quietly, gathering the items from his list. "I am not used to kindness from strangers. Yes, I am from Nebraska, further east." "Well, welcome to Ashford Creek." "It is not much, but folks here tend to look out for each other." He watched her work with an appreciation that felt observant rather than invasive. "You are quick with those numbers. Martha made a good choice hiring you." They fell into an easier conversation as Theresa tallied his purchases. Yates told her about the Thornton Ranch, a cattle operation he ran with his younger brother Lucas 5 miles north of town. Their parents had passed years ago, leaving the two brothers to build the ranch into something profitable. It was hard work, he explained, but honest work that gave him satisfaction. There was something in the way he spoke, with genuine pride but no arrogance, that made Theresa want to keep listening. "That comes to $12.40, she said finally, wrapping the last items in brown paper. Yates counted out the money, then added an extra nickel. "For the peppermint sticks. And Theresa, if you ever need anything, the Thornton Ranch is due north on the main road. Cannot miss it." After he left, Martha returned from the back with a knowing look. "Yates Thornton is one of the good ones. Honest as the day is long, works harder than any 3 men I know. Lost his folks to cholera when he was just 19, raised his brother from a boy while building that ranch from nothing." "Why are you telling me this?" Theresa asked, though her cheeks felt warm. "Because I saw the way he looked at you, and I saw the way you blushed. And because if trouble comes from Lincoln, Yates is exactly the kind of man who would stand between you and it." Theresa wanted to protest, to say that she could not afford to think about men or romance or anything beyond survival, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she focused on organizing the shelves and tried not to think about pale blue eyes and a warm smile. 2 weeks passed in relative peace. Yates came to town 3 more times, always finding reasons to linger at the Mercantile, to talk with Theresa while Martha watched with poorly concealed amusement. Theresa learned that he was 25 years old, that he loved his brother fiercely but worried about Lucas's reckless streak, that he dreamed of expanding the ranch someday to include horse breeding. In turn, she shared carefully edited pieces of her own life, speaking of her childhood love of books and her skill with watercolor painting, though she omitted any details that might identify her father or Victor. She found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. She had no right to feel this way about anyone, not when she was running from a forced engagement, not when discovery could come at any moment. But Yates made her laugh with stories about stubborn cattle and his brother's mishaps, and he listened when she talked as though her words truly mattered. It was a kind of attention she had never received from the society men in Lincoln, who had always spoken over her or dismissed her opinions as charming but irrelevant. On a Wednesday afternoon in late June, disaster arrived in the form of a telegram delivered to the Mercantile by the postal carrier. Martha's face went pale as she read it, and she immediately called Theresa into the back room. This came addressed to the postmaster, asking if anyone had seen a young woman matching your description. It is from a Victor Hollis in Lincoln, offering a reward for information leading to your return. Martha's hands trembled slightly as she held the paper. He is calling you a confused young woman who fled in a state of mental distress. He is making it sound like he is a concerned fiancé worried for your safety. Theresa felt the room tilt. How long before someone recognizes me? Before someone sends word back for that reward money? I do not know, but we need to assume it will be soon. Ashford Creek is small and people talk. That reward is $50, which is more money than most folks here see in 6 months. I have to leave. I will pack my things and go west, maybe try to reach Colorado or Wyoming territory. Even as she said it, Theresa knew how hopeless it sounded. She had barely $40 saved, not enough to get far, and the dangers of a woman traveling alone were considerable. Martha grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me, girl. There might be another way. It is not conventional, but it might be the only thing that could legally protect you from that man. What do you mean, marriage? If you are married to someone else, Victor Hollis has no legal claim on you. That engagement your father made would be void. Theresa stared at her. I do not understand. Who would marry me? I cannot ask someone to bind themselves to me just to save me from Victor. You could ask someone who cares about you. Someone who has been finding every excuse to come to town since the day you arrived. Martha's meaning was crystal clear. No, I cannot ask that of Yates. It would be using him, trapping him in a marriage he never wanted. That would make me no better than my father trying to force me to marry Victor. Then do not ask it as a trap. Ask it as a partnership with honesty about what you need and why. Yates is a grown man capable of making his own choices. At least give him the opportunity to choose. Before Theresa could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Both women froze at the sound of an unfamiliar voice, cultured and cold, asking the customer at the counter if they had seen a young woman recently arrived in town. Stay here, Martha hissed, and went out to the main room. Theresa pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Through the crack in the door, she could see a man in an expensive suit, his dark hair slicked back with pomade. Not Victor himself, but likely someone he had sent ahead to scout the area. I run a quiet store, mister, and I do not make it a habit to gossip about my customers or employees, Martha said firmly. I am authorized to offer a substantial reward for information. The young lady's fiancé is quite worried about her mental state. She may not even know her own name. If I see anyone matching that description, I will be sure to let the sheriff know. Now, are you buying anything, or are you just taking up space in my store? The man's voice took on a harder edge. This town is small, madam. Someone will talk eventually. And when they do, anyone who harbored the girl will find themselves in legal trouble for interfering with family matters. After he left, Martha returned to the back room. You have maybe a day, 2 at most. That man is going to ask questions at every business in Ashford Creek. Someone will eventually point him toward this store. Theresa sank down onto a crate, her mind racing. I will leave tonight. I will not bring trouble down on you after all your kindness. You will not make it half a day alone out there, and you know it. Martha pulled on her shawl. I am going to the Thornton ranch. If Yates is half the man I think he is, he will want to know what is happening. Martha, please, I cannot let you involve him in this. Too late. That man in the suit is going to ask questions all over town. Yates will hear about it within hours anyway. Better he hears the truth from us. Martha was already heading toward the door. Lock up behind me and stay away from the windows. I will be back within 2 hours. Alone in the mercantile, Theresa paced the back room like a caged animal. She had been a fool to think she could escape Victor's reach so easily. Men like him, men with money and connections, always got what they wanted. She should have kept running instead of letting herself become comfortable here. Instead of letting herself care about Martha and the little store, and if she was honest with herself, about a certain cowboy with kind eyes and a warm smile. The sound of horses approaching made her jump. She peered carefully through the window and saw Martha's wagon returning, but with 2 riders alongside. Yates sat astride a bay horse, his face set in serious lines, and next to him was a younger man who shared his features. though with lighter hair and a more reckless cast to his jaw. That would be Lucas, his brother. They came in through the back door, and Yates's eyes found Theresa immediately. Martha told me everything. About your father forcing an engagement to Victor Hollis, about you running, about the man asking questions in town today. I am so sorry, Theresa said, her voice breaking. I never meant to bring trouble here. I will leave tonight and draw them away from Ashford Creek. You will do no such thing, Yates said firmly. He crossed the room to stand in front of her, and she could see worry and determination warring in his expression. Theresa, I am going to say something, and I need you to listen before you respond. Martha suggested a solution, and I have been thinking about it the whole ride back to town. Yates, you cannot possibly want to marry a woman you have known for barely 2 weeks just to save her from a forced engagement. That is madness. Is it madness, or is it the most sensible thing I have considered in years? He took her hands in his touch gentle but steady. I have spent more time thinking about you in the past 2 weeks than I have spent thinking about ranch business. I find excuses to come to town, because seeing you has become the best part of my day. When Martha told me you were in danger, my first thought was not about inconvenience or trouble. It was about keeping you safe, whatever that takes. But marriage is permanent, Yates. You would be bound to me for life. I know what marriage means. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, and I am not proposing out of pure chivalry, though that is part of it. I am proposing because I want the chance to know you better, to see if what I feel might grow into something real. If you marry me, Victor Hollis has no claim on you. We can stand before a judge as husband and wife, and there is nothing he can legally do. Lucas spoke up from where he leaned against the doorframe. My brother is not given to impulsive decisions, Miss Turner. If he says he wants to do this, he has thought it through. And for what it is worth, I think you are good for him. I have not seen him this animated about anything since we acquired our first breeding bull. Despite everything, Theresa felt a laugh bubble up at the comparison. That is quite the endorsement. Theresa, Yates said, drawing her attention back to him. His eyes were earnest, searching hers. I am not asking you to love me today. I am asking you to give us both a chance at something better than what we would have separately. You need legal protection from a dangerous man. I need a partner, someone to share the ranch and the life I am building. Maybe over time that partnership could become something more. And if it does not, if we find we cannot stand each other a year from now, then we figure it out together honestly. But Theresa, I do not think that will happen. I think you feel this pull between us same as I do. I think you look forward to my visits the way I count the days between them. I think we have the beginning of something worth fighting for. Theresa looked at their joined hands, at the callous strength of his fingers wrapped around hers. She thought about Victor Hollis and his cold smile, about the life of fear and subservience she would have as his wife. Then she thought about Yates, about his stories and his laughter, about the way he listened when she spoke as though her thoughts had value. It was not a conventional love story, not the romance she had read about in books, but it was a chance at freedom, at safety, at the possibility of real happiness. If we do this, she said slowly, I need you to know the truth about who I am. My name is Theresa Turner. My father is Thomas Turner, who owns a shipping company in Lincoln. He arranged my engagement to Victor Hollis to secure a business partnership. Victor is 42 years old, wealthy, and connected to territorial politics. He is also cruel. I have seen him strike his animals and his servants. I saw bruises on his housekeeper. I could not marry him knowing what my life would become. Then you will not marry him, Yates said simply. You will marry me instead today if possible. Martha cleared her throat. Judge Anderson is in town for the circuit court session. He is staying at the boarding house. If we can get to him before that investigator spreads enough money around to loosen tongues, we can have you two married within the hour." Everything happened with dizzying speed after that. Martha sent Lucas to fetch Judge Anderson with a message that a couple needed to be married urgently for legal reasons. Yates rode to the sheriff's office to explain the situation to Sheriff Coleman, an older man who had known the Thornton family for decades. Theresa changed into the best dress she owned, a simple green cotton that Martha had helped her make from store fabric, and tried to calm her racing heart. When Judge Anderson arrived at the Mercantile, he was a portly man in his 60s with shrewd eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened to Theresa's story with careful attention, asked pointed questions about her age and whether she was entering the marriage of her own free will, and then nodded his approval. "I have heard of Victor Hollis," he said gravely. "A man of business and politics, certainly, but I have also heard rumors about his temperament. Young lady, if you are certain this is what you want, I am satisfied that you are acting of your own volition and not under duress from Mr. Thornton here." "I am certain, Your Honor. Yates is offering me a choice which is more than anyone else has done." "Then let us proceed. Do you have a ring, Mr. Thornton?" Yates looked stricken for a moment, then Lucas pulled a simple gold band from his own finger. "This was our mother's wedding ring. She would want Yates to have it for this." The ceremony was brief and practical, conducted in the back room of the Mercantile with Martha and Lucas as witnesses. Theresa felt surreal as she repeated the vows, promising to honor and cherish a man she had known for such a short time. But when Yates slid the ring onto her finger and the judge pronounced them husband and wife, she felt something shift inside her chest. This was real. She was Theresa Thornton now, legally bound to the cowboy who stood beside her with steady strength. "You may kiss your bride," Judge Anderson said with a slight smile. Yates cupped her face gently in his hands, his eyes asking permission even though they had just been granted it by law and religion. Theresa nodded slightly, and he leaned in to press his lips to hers in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. It was her first real kiss, and when they pulled apart, she could feel heat flooding her cheeks. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Thornton," the judge said. "I will file the marriage certificate with the county clerk tomorrow morning. As of this moment, any prior engagement Miss Turner may have been subject to is null and void. She is legally your wife, and no other man has any claim on her." They were still processing the reality of what had just happened when the Mercantile door banged open. Sheriff Coleman strode in, his expression grim. "That investigator from Lincoln is asking questions at the saloon. Offered $50 to anyone who can point him toward a young woman new to town. Yates, you and your bride need to come with me now. I want you at the sheriff's office when he shows up, which he will within the hour." The sheriff's office was a small wooden building next to the jail, furnished with a desk, several chairs, and wanted posters covering one wall. Sheriff Coleman positioned Yates and Theresa in chairs in front of his desk and stood behind it with his arms crossed, presenting a united front. "When this fellow comes through that door," the sheriff said, "you let me do most of the talking. Yates, you back up what I say. Mrs. Thornton, you stay calm and remember that you are legally married now. He has no power over you." They did not have long to wait. The door opened and the man in the suit walked in, his eyes sweeping the room with predatory assessment. When his gaze landed on Theresa, a satisfied smile crossed his face. "There you are, Miss Turner. Mr. Hollis has been quite worried about you. It is Mrs. Thornton now," Sheriff Coleman said before Theresa could speak. "This lady was married this afternoon to Mr. Yates Thornton here, a respected rancher and member of this community. The marriage was performed by Judge Anderson and properly witnessed." So unless you have some other business in Ashford Creek, I suggest you head back to Lincoln and inform Mr. Hollis that Miss Turner is no longer available." The investigator's smile faded. "That is impossible. Miss Turner is engaged to Mr. Hollis. Her father signed a legal contract." "A contract that has no bearing now that the young lady is married to someone else," the sheriff said. "She is of legal age, acted of her own free will, and is now under the legal protection of her husband. You are welcome to verify the marriage certificate with Judge Anderson if you doubt my word." "Mr. Hollis will not accept this. He has invested considerable time and money in this engagement." "Then Mr. Hollis will be disappointed," Yates said, speaking for the first time. He stood and placed a protective hand on Theresa's shoulder. "My wife is not an investment or a piece of property. She is a free woman who made her own choice. If Victor Hollis has a problem with that, he is welcome to take it up with me directly." The investigator's eyes narrowed. "You are making a powerful enemy, Cowboy. Mr. Hollis has connections throughout Nebraska territory. He can make life very difficult for you. And I have friends right here in Ashford Creek who do not take kindly to threats," Yates replied evenly. "You have delivered your message and received your answer. I suggest you leave now before you wear out what little welcome you had." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut, but finally the investigator stepped back toward the door. "This is not over. Mr. Hollis will want to speak with Miss Turner himself." "Mrs. Thornton," the sheriff corrected firmly. "And if Mr. Hollis wants to visit Ashford Creek, he will find himself subject to local laws like any other visitor. That includes laws against harassment and disturbing the peace. I will be writing to the sheriff in Lincoln to inform him of the situation, so everyone is clear on the legal standing here." After the man left, Theresa released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking, and Yates immediately knelt beside her chair. "You are safe," he said quietly. "I will not let him take you, I promise you that." "He was right, though," she said, her voice unsteady. "Victor has connections, money, influence. He could make trouble for you for the ranch for Lucas. Let him try." "The Thornton Ranch was built by hard work and honest dealing. We do not owe Victor Hollis or any man like him a damned thing." Yates took her hands, steadying them with his warmth. "Theresa, you are my wife now. That means we face whatever comes together. You understand?" She nodded, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. Relief and fear and gratitude all tangled together until she could not separate one emotion from another. Yates pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean against his solid strength, breathing in the scent of leather and sun and something uniquely him. Sheriff Coleman cleared his throat. "You two should head out to the ranch before it gets dark. Yates, keep your eyes open on the road. I do not trust that fellow not to cause trouble, though I doubt he will try anything directly. Still, better safe than sorry." The ride out to the Thornton Ranch was quiet, with Yates and Lucas flanking Theresa's horse on either side. The sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of amber and crimson, and despite everything, Theresa felt a stirring of wonder at the beauty of it. This was her new home, this wide open land under an endless sky. It was so different from Lincoln with its proper houses and manicured gardens, but somehow it felt more real, more honest. The ranch itself came into view as they crested a low hill. A sturdy two-story house built of timber and stone stood at the center, surrounded by a barn, stable, corral, and several outbuildings. It was not grand, but it looked solid and well-maintained, a place built to last. Smoke curled from the chimney and warm light glowed in the windows. "Home," Yates said simply, and Theresa heard pride in his voice. "It is not much compared to what you are probably used to in Lincoln, but it is ours. Yours now, too." "It is beautiful," she said honestly. "It looks like a real home." Lucas rode ahead to tend the horses while Yates helped Theresa dismount. Her legs were unsteady from the ride and the emotional upheaval of the day, and she stumbled slightly. Yates caught her easily, his hands at her waist, and for a moment they stood close together in the fading light. "I know this day has been overwhelming," he said quietly. "We went from strangers to spouses in a matter of hours. I do not expect anything from you tonight except rest. We have time to figure out what this marriage will be. Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For believing me, for protecting me, for giving me a choice." "Always," he promised. Inside, the house was warm and simply furnished. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a sturdy wooden table at the other. Stairs led up to the second floor where the bedrooms would be. Everything was clean but clearly the domain of men living alone, practical and undecorated. "I know it needs a woman's touch," Yates said, sounding almost apologetic. "Lucas and I have not exactly been focused on curtains and such." "It is perfect," Theresa said. She meant it too. The house felt safe and solid, untouched by the performance and pretense that had filled her father's home in Lincoln. "Where should I put my things?" Yates hesitated. "The main bedroom is upstairs at the front of the house." "That is mine, or rather, ours now, I suppose. But there is a guest room as well if you would prefer your own space for now. I meant what I said about not expecting anything. We can take this slow." Relief and something else, something warmer, flooded through her. "I think slow is wise. I would like the guest room for tonight, if that is all right." "Of course." He carried her small satchel upstairs and showed her to a modest room with a single bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the prairie. "Take whatever time you need. I will be downstairs if you need anything." Alone in the room, Theresa sank onto the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of the day. She was married. She was Theresa Thornton, wife to a cowboy she barely knew, living on a ranch in the middle of Nebraska prairie. It was not the life she had imagined for herself, not the romantic courtship and gradual falling in love she had dreamed about as a girl. But as she looked at the gold ring on her finger, she thought perhaps it could be something even better. A true partnership built on respect and honesty. The next morning, Theresa woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Yates at the stove, cooking eggs and bacon with competent efficiency. He looked up when she entered, and his smile was warm and genuine. "Morning. I hope you slept all right. Coffee is fresh if you want some." "Thank you." She poured herself a cup and sat at the table watching him cook. "Where is Lucas?" "Already out checking the cattle. We have got about 200 head right now, plus some horses we are training to sell. Ranch work starts early." He brought over 2 plates and sat across from her. "I thought maybe after breakfast I could show you around the place, introduce you to how things work here. You do not have to do ranch work if you do not want to, but I figured you might like to know your way around." They spent the morning touring the property, and Theresa found herself fascinated by the operation. Yates explained the cattle rotation, the water sources, the plans he had for expanding the herd and improving the bloodlines. He showed her the vegetable garden behind the house, currently overgrown and neglected, and admitted with a sheepish grin that neither he nor Lucas had much skill with growing things. "I could work on the garden," Theresa offered. "I am not afraid of dirt, and we grew vegetables at my father's house. I enjoyed it." "It would be yours to do with as you please," Yates said. "In fact, the whole house is yours to change however you want. Like I said, Lucas and I are not exactly decorators." They were walking back toward the house when the sound of approaching horses made them both tense. Yates moved instinctively to place himself between Theresa and the road, his hand dropping to the revolver at his hip. But as the riders came into view, he relaxed slightly. "That is Sheriff Coleman and Judge Anderson," he said. "Wonder what brings them out here." The two men dismounted and accepted Yates's offer of coffee inside. Once they were settled at the table, Judge Anderson pulled out an official-looking document. "I wanted to deliver this personally," he said, handing it to Yates. "Your marriage certificate, properly filed and recorded. Mrs. Thornton, you are now legally married in the eyes of the territory and any federal authority. I also took the liberty of writing a letter to the county clerk in Lincoln, informing them of your marriage and requesting that any prior engagements be officially noted as dissolved." "Thank you, Your Honor," Theresa said. "I cannot tell you what this means to me." Sheriff Coleman spoke up. "There is more. That investigator left town yesterday, but I have heard through my contacts in Lincoln that Victor Hollis is not taking this well. He is threatening legal action, claiming the marriage was done under duress to escape a valid contract." "Can he do that?" Theresa felt panic rising. "Can he claim the marriage is not valid? He can claim anything he wants," Judge Anderson said firmly. "But he will not win. I performed the ceremony myself, and I questioned you thoroughly to ensure you were acting of your own free will. You are of legal age, not mentally incompetent, and not under physical duress from Mr. Thornton. Any judge worth his salt will uphold this marriage. However," the sheriff added, "it would not surprise me if Hollis himself shows up in Ashford Creek to try to intimidate you. Man like that does not like being told no. Yates, you keep your eyes open and your rifle close." After they left, Theresa found herself unable to shake the anxiety. She had hoped that marrying Yates would end Victor's pursuit, but it seemed she had only escalated the situation. That evening, as she helped prepare dinner alongside Yates and Lucas, she was quiet and withdrawn. "Hey," Yates said gently, catching her hand as she reached for a pot. "Talk to me. What are you thinking?" "I am thinking that I have brought nothing but trouble to your life. Victor is not going to give up, and now you and Lucas are in danger because of me." "No," Yates said firmly. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You brought yourself into our lives, and that is not trouble. That is a gift. Do not let Victor Hollis make you feel like you are a burden. He is the problem, not you." Lucas nodded from where he was slicing bread. "Brother is right. Besides, this ranch was getting boring. A little excitement never hurt anyone." "You could die because of me," Theresa said, her voice breaking. "Victor has hired men before. He could send someone to hurt you, to burn the ranch, anything to punish me for defying him." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her close while she trembled against him. "Then we will deal with it together. Theresa, I made you a promise when I married you. I promised to protect you, to stand by you. I meant those words. Whatever comes, we face it as a team." The days that followed were tense but passed without incident. Theresa threw herself into work around the ranch, taking over the kitchen and garden, mending clothes and learning the rhythms of cattle ranch life. She discovered she enjoyed the physical labor, the tangible results of her efforts. The garden began to recover under her care, and she started planning where to plant vegetables for the fall harvest. Yates was endlessly patient with her, giving her space when she needed it, but also making time each day to talk, to share meals, to simply exist in each other's company. Theresa found herself noticing small things about him. The way he hummed while he worked, the gentleness with which he handled the horses, the fierce protectiveness he showed toward his brother and now toward her. She caught herself watching him more often, appreciating the way his muscles moved under his shirt, the sound of his laughter echoing across the prairie. It was nearly 2 weeks after the wedding when Victor Hollis finally arrived in Ashford Creek. Theresa was in town with Martha, helping at the mercantile when his carriage rolled down the main street. Her blood turned to ice at the sight of him, tall and impeccably dressed, his dark eyes scanning the buildings with predatory focus. "Get to the back room," Martha hissed. "I will handle this." But it was too late. Victor had already spotted her through the window. He pushed open the door with barely controlled violence, and his gaze locked onto Theresa with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "There you are," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "You have led me on quite a chase, my dear. Your father is beside himself with worry." "I am not your dear, and I am not going anywhere with you," Theresa said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I am married, Mr. Hollis. Whatever arrangement you had with my father is no longer valid. A marriage conducted in haste to avoid your legal obligations. I think any reasonable judge will see through that farce." He stepped closer, and Theresa instinctively backed away. "You belong to me, Theresa. Your father gave his word, signed a contract. You will honor that agreement, or I will see your cowboy husband ruined." "The lady told you she is not interested," a voice said from the doorway. Yates stood there with Sheriff Coleman beside him, both men armed and watchful. "You need to leave now, Hollis." Victor turned to appraise Yates with open contempt. "So you are the hired help she ran to. Tell me, cowboy, how much would it take to buy you off? Name your price, and I will pay it to dissolve this sham marriage." "My wife is not for sale at any price," Yates said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And you will address her with respect, or you will deal with me." "Your wife," Victor laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "She was mine first. Her father promised her to me, took my money for the engagement. You are interfering with a legal contract." "That contract became void the moment Theresa married someone else," Sheriff Coleman interjected. "Mr. Hollis, you need to accept the situation and move on. The lady made her choice." Victor's mask of civility slipped, revealing the cruelty underneath. "She is a confused child who does not know what she wants. I will not lose what is mine to some dirt farmer pretending to be a gentleman." Yates moved fast, crossing the distance between them before Theresa could blink. He grabbed Victor by the lapels of his expensive coat and slammed him against the wall hard enough to rattle the shelves. "Call me names all you want," Yates growled, his face inches from Victor's. "But you will not speak about my wife that way. She is a grown woman who made an informed choice. The only one confused here is you, thinking you can buy or bully people into doing what you want." "Yates," the sheriff warned, though he made no move to intervene. "Let him go before this becomes assault." Yates released Victor with visible effort, stepping back but keeping himself between the older man and Theresa. "Get out of Ashford Creek, Hollis. There is nothing for you here." Victor straightened his coat with shaking hands, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. "This is not over. I will see you ruined, cowboy. Your ranch will fail, your cattle will die, and you will wish you had never laid eyes on her." "Threats like that can land you in jail," Sheriff Coleman said. "I am giving you until sundown to leave town. If you are still here after that, I will arrest you for disturbing the peace and making terroristic threats. Do I make myself clear?" Victor looked at each of them in turn, his expression promising retribution, then stalked out of the mercantile without another word. Theresa sagged against the counter, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Yates was at her side immediately, his arm around her waist, holding her up. "It is all right," he murmured. "He is gone. You are safe." But Theresa knew it was not over. She had seen the rage in Victor's eyes, the wounded pride of a man who had been denied something he considered his property. Men like Victor did not simply walk away. That night at the ranch, Yates insisted on teaching Theresa how to shoot. They set up bottles on fence posts, and he stood behind her, his arms around hers as he showed her how to hold the revolver, how to aim and squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it. "I do not want to kill anyone," she protested, even as she followed his instructions. "Neither do I. But I want you to be able to defend yourself if I am not here, just in case." His breath was warm against her ear, and Theresa found herself acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. "You are a natural. Look, you hit 3 out of 6. They practiced until dark, and then Yates walked her back to the house with his hand resting protectively at the small of her back. Inside, Lucas had started a fire against the evening chill, and the three of them sat together discussing plans for dealing with potential trouble. "I have been thinking," Lucas said. "Maybe we should hire a couple of ranch hands, men who can help with the work but also keep watch. If Hollis tries something, we need to be ready." "That costs money we do not exactly have to spare," Yates pointed out. "The ranch is doing well, but we are not rich." "I have some money saved," Theresa offered. "Not much, but enough to help pay for hired help if needed. This is my fault. I should contribute to fixing it." "This is not your fault, and it is our money now anyway," Yates said. "We are married, remember. What is mine is yours and vice versa. But Lucas has a point. I will ask around town, see if there are any good men looking for work." Over the next week, they hired 2 ranch hands recommended by Sheriff Coleman. Both were older cowboys, weathered men in their 40s who had worked ranches throughout Nebraska and were looking for steady employment. Jack Reeves was a quiet man with sharp eyes who had served as a scout during the Indian Wars. Tom Brennan was more talkative, with a ready laugh and a reputation for being unshakable in a crisis. Both men were competent with guns and cattle, exactly what the Thornton ranch needed. With extra help, the ranch work became more manageable, and Yates found more time to spend with Theresa. He began joining her in the garden in the evenings, and they would talk while she weeded, and he repaired fence posts or other small tasks that needed doing. These conversations ranged from practical matters about the ranch to deeper topics about their hopes and fears, their pasts and dreams for the future. "Tell me about your mother," Theresa asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Yates was quiet for a moment, his hand stilling on the fence post he was mending. "She was strong, stronger than anyone I have ever known. When the cholera came through, she fought it for 3 weeks. My father went fast, just 3 days from first symptoms to death. But Ma, she kept fighting even when we could see she was losing. Her last words were to me and Lucas, telling us to take care of each other and to never sell this land." "She would be proud of what you have built here," Theresa said softly. "I hope so. Some days I wonder if we are doing right by their memory. The ranch is successful, but it is not easy. There are times when I think about what it would be like to have a simpler life, maybe in town, not worrying about drought or cattle prices or land disputes." He looked at her then, his blue eyes intense. "But then I remember that this land is ours, really ours. No landlord, no boss, just us and what we can make of it. That freedom is worth fighting for." "I understand that now," Theresa said. "When I was in Lincoln, everything felt prescribed and controlled. Who I could talk to, what I could wear, who I would marry. Coming here, even with all the danger and uncertainty, I feel more free than I ever did in my father's house. Do you miss it at all? The comfort, the society?" She considered the question honestly. "I miss some things. I miss having books to read, musical performances, art. But I do not miss the pretense, the constant performance of being a proper lady. Here I can just be myself." "We could get you books," Yates said. "The Mercantile has some, and we could order more from back east. And there is no reason you cannot paint here. The landscape is beautiful, and you could capture it." The thoughtfulness of his words touched her deeply. Here was a man who barely knew her but was already thinking about what would make her happy. "Thank you, Yates, for everything." He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You do not have to thank me. This is what marriage should be, partners caring for each other." Theresa felt her heart skip at his touch. They had been married for almost a month now, and while they still slept in separate rooms, she found herself increasingly drawn to him. She noticed the way her pulse quickened when he smiled at her, how she looked forward to their evenings together more than anything else in her day. It was not the dramatic, overwhelming passion described in novels, but rather a steady warmth that grew stronger with each passing day. "Yates," she said quietly, "I have been thinking about our arrangement about this marriage." He tensed slightly. "What about it? When you proposed, you said we would take things slow, see if partnership could become something more." She took a breath, gathering courage. "I think it already has. For me, at least. I find myself caring for you, looking forward to seeing you, missing you when you are out on the range. I do not know if that is love yet, but it feels like it could be." The smile that broke across his face was brilliant, transforming his usually serious expression into something open and joyful. "I was hoping you felt that way, because I have been half in love with you since the day I walked into that mercantile and saw you behind the counter. Every day since has only made it stronger." "Only half," she teased, feeling giddy with relief and happiness. "All right, maybe more than half, maybe completely." He cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "Theresa, I know we did this backwards, marriage first and courtship after. But I want to court you properly now. I want to learn everything about you, every thought in your head, every dream you have. I want to earn your love the right way." "I think you already have," she whispered, and then she closed the distance between them and kissed him. This kiss was different from the brief one at their wedding ceremony. This was deeper, more passionate, a meeting of mouths and hearts that left them both breathless. Yates pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, and Theresa melted against him, feeling safe and desired and cherished all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both were flushed and smiling. "So," Yates said, his voice slightly rough, "does this mean you might consider moving into the main bedroom? As my wife in truth, not just in law." Theresa felt her cheeks heat, but she nodded. "Yes, I think I would like that very much." That night, for the first time, Theresa slept in Yates's bed, wrapped in his arms with her head resting on his chest. They made love slowly and tenderly, Yates patient with her inexperience, murmuring words of love and reassurance as they learned each other's bodies. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Theresa felt a completeness she had never known before. "I love you," she said into the quiet. "I did not think I could fall in love this fast, but I do. I love you, Yates Thornton." "I love you too," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "My wife, my partner, my love. I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." The happiness of that night made what came next even more devastating. 3 days later, Theresa was in the garden when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. She ran toward the commotion to find Jack and Tom trying to contain a fire that had started in the hay storage. Yates and Lucas were already fighting the flames with buckets of water, but the dry hay was catching fast, threatening to spread to the barn itself. "Get more water from the well," Yates shouted. "Lucas, get the horses out before the smoke gets them." It took 2 hours of desperate work to contain the fire and prevent it from destroying the barn. By the time they had it under control, everyone was covered in soot and exhausted. The hay storage was completely destroyed, representing hundreds of dollars in feed they would need to replace before winter. Jack was the one who found evidence of accelerant near where the fire had started. This was not an accident, boss. Someone set this deliberately. They all knew who was responsible, though proving it would be impossible. Victor Hollis had made good on his threat to ruin them, or at least to start. Yates stood staring at the charred remains of the storage building, his jaw clenched with barely contained rage. "He is trying to drive us under," Lucas said. "First the hay, then what? The cattle, the house." "We need to set watches at night," Yates decided. "Jack, Tom, can you split the night shifts? Keep an eye on the property, shoot to warn if you see anything suspicious." "What about going to the sheriff?" Theresa asked. "Surely this is evidence of arson." "Evidence that someone set a fire, but no proof of who," Yates said tiredly. "And Victor will have an alibi. Men like him always do. They hire others to do their dirty work." The attacks continued sporadically over the next 2 months. Fences were cut, allowing cattle to wander. Water sources were fouled with dead animals. Equipment was sabotaged. Each incident cost time and money the ranch could ill afford, and the constant vigilance took its toll on everyone. Yates began sleeping poorly, always alert for sounds of trouble. Theresa noticed new lines of stress around his eyes, the way his shoulders stayed perpetually tense. She confronted him about it one night as they prepared for bed. "This cannot go on, Yates. The ranch cannot survive this constant assault, and neither can you. Maybe I should leave, go somewhere far away where Victor cannot use me as leverage against you." "No." His response was immediate and fierce. "You are not leaving. That is exactly what he wants, to separate us, to make you vulnerable again. We stay together and we fight this together. But at what cost? How much more can we lose before the ranch fails?" Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I do not know. But I know that losing you would be worse than losing everything else. You are what matters, Theresa. The ranch, the cattle, all of it is just things. You are my wife, my heart. I would burn the whole operation to the ground before I would let him have you." His words made her cry, overwhelmed by the depth of his devotion and the impossible situation they were trapped in. She had brought this on him, her attempt to escape one man's cruelty resulting in another man she loved suffering instead. It was Sheriff Coleman who finally provided a potential solution. He rode out to the ranch one morning with news that Victor Hollis had been arrested in Lincoln for assaulting a business associate during a dispute. The man was pressing charges, and with his history of violence now becoming public, other people were coming forward with their own stories of intimidation and abuse. Victor's political connections cannot protect him from multiple assault charges, the sheriff explained. He is looking at jail time, possibly up to 5 years if the prosecutor can make all the charges stick. And his business dealings are under scrutiny now too. Seems he has been using less than legal methods to secure contracts. "So it is over?" Theresa asked, hardly daring to hope. "Not entirely. Victor will likely make bail, and even if he goes to prison, he could still hire someone to cause trouble. But his attention is going to be focused on his own legal problems for the foreseeable future. And with his reputation damaged, he has less influence to wield against you." The relief was overwhelming, though tempered by caution. Over the following weeks, the attacks on the ranch ceased. They heard through Martha that Victor had indeed made bail but was under court order to remain in Lincoln pending trial. His businesses were failing as former associates distanced themselves, and his social standing had collapsed under the weight of the assault allegations. "It is really over," Theresa said one evening as she and Yates sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "He cannot hurt us anymore." "Maybe not directly," Yates agreed. "But we are still dealing with the damage he caused. That lost hay, the repairs we had to make, it put us behind for the year. We will recover, but it will take time." Time we have now, Theresa pointed out. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. And we have each other. That is what matters most. The following spring brought new life to the ranch. Theresa discovered she was pregnant in March, and the news filled the house with joy. Yates was simultaneously excited and terrified, already worrying about everything that could go wrong, determined to take care of her through every moment of the pregnancy. "You are being ridiculous," she laughed as he insisted on carrying everything for her, even baskets that weighed barely 5 pounds. "I am pregnant, not made of glass." "You are carrying my child. That makes you precious cargo," he replied, refusing to be swayed. Lucas was thrilled at the prospect of becoming an uncle and immediately began planning expansions to the house to accommodate a growing family. The ranch hands, Jack and Tom, congratulated them with gruff affection and promised to help however they could. The baby, a son they named Daniel after Yates's father, was born in November during an early cold snap. The birth was long and difficult, attended by the town doctor and Martha, who stayed at the ranch for 3 days to help. When Theresa finally held her son for the first time, seeing Yates's eyes looking back at her from that tiny face, she felt her heart expand with a love she had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Yates whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he cradled his son for the first time. "You are both perfect. Thank you for this gift, Theresa. Thank you for giving me a family." They learned together how to be parents, navigating sleepless nights and endless diaper changes with humor and patience. Theresa discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed, and Yates proved to be a devoted father who could calm Daniel's fussing with a gentleness that made her fall in love with him all over again. News reached them in January that Victor Hollis had been convicted on 2 counts of assault and sentenced to 3 years in prison. His business holdings had been liquidated to pay debts and legal fees. Thomas Turner, Theresa's father, had written a brief letter informing her of Victor's fate and including a terse line about hoping she was well in her new life. It was not an apology or a reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, and Theresa accepted it as the closest to peace she would get from that quarter. The years that followed were marked by steady growth and deepening love. The ranch prospered as Yates and Lucas expanded their cattle operation and began breeding horses as Yates had once dreamed. Theresa became known in Ashford Creek for her painted landscapes of the prairie, which Martha sold in the mercantile to travelers passing through. She taught herself more sophisticated techniques from books Yates ordered for her, transforming a hobby into genuine artistry. Daniel grew into a lively, curious child with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. 2 years after his birth, Theresa gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn determination. The house rang with laughter and the chaos of children, and Yates would sometimes stop in the middle of his work just to listen, amazed that this was his life now. On a warm June evening in 1878, exactly 5 years after Theresa had fled Lincoln, the family gathered on the porch after dinner. Daniel was showing his little sister how to catch fireflies while Theresa sat in the rocking chair Yates had made for her, watching her children play. Yates came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders and pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Thornton," he murmured. 5 years, she said wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago that I walked into Martha's store desperate and afraid. Other times it feels like yesterday. Any regrets?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Not a single one." "Well, maybe one," he tensed. "What?" She turned to look up at him with a teasing smile. "I regret that I did not meet you sooner, Think of all the time we could have had together." He laughed and kissed her properly, deep and sweet and full of the love they had built over 5 years of partnership. "Then we will just have to make the most of all the time we have ahead. Another 50 years at least." "At least," she agreed. Lucas joined them on the porch, holding Sarah, who had grown tired from chasing fireflies. "I got a letter today," he said, settling into a chair. "From that rancher up in Wyoming territory. He wants to buy 3 of our horses and wants to discuss a breeding partnership. Could be a good opportunity to expand our reputation. We would need to travel up there to discuss terms," Yates mused. "Make a family trip of it. The children are old enough now to handle the journey." "An adventure," Theresa said, her eyes lighting up. "I have never been to Wyoming territory." They began planning the trip, discussing logistics and timing, their voices mingling with the sounds of the prairie night and Daniel's delighted laughter as he caught another firefly. This was the life Theresa had chosen when she ran from Victor Hollis, though she could not have imagined it then. Not just escape from cruelty, but genuine happiness, a love that grew deeper with each passing day, and a family built on respect and partnership rather than control and possession. The stars emerged overhead, countless points of light scattered across the vast Nebraska sky. Somewhere out there were the places Theresa had come from, the life she had left behind. But here, on this porch with her husband's arms around her and her children's laughter filling the air, she was exactly where she belonged. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. The trip to Wyoming territory proved successful, establishing a breeding partnership that brought in additional income and expanded the Thornton Ranch's reputation throughout the region. Yates's judgment about horses proved as sound as his cattle sense, and within 3 years they were supplying mounts to the cavalry stationed at Fort Robinson. Daniel grew into a serious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch business with the dedication of a born cattleman. Sarah developed her mother's artistic eye and her father's determination, declaring at age 6 that she would someday have the finest horse ranch in all of Nebraska. Lucas eventually married in 1881, bringing home a schoolteacher named Catherine who charmed the entire family with her wit and warmth. They built their own house on the ranch property, close enough to help with operations but far enough for privacy. In 1883, Theresa gave birth to twins, much to everyone's surprise and Yates's near panic. William and Grace arrived in April, healthy and loud, doubling the chaos in the Thornton household. Theresa handled the challenge with practiced calm, though she was grateful for Catherine's help, and for Sarah's enthusiastic, if sometimes misguided attempts to care for her baby siblings. The ranch continued to prosper through hard work and careful management. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, disease outbreaks among the cattle and fluctuating market prices. Through it all, Yates and Theresa maintained the partnership they had forged in those early uncertain days, making decisions together, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating victories as a team. Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1885, leaving the mercantile to her nephew, but bequeathing a substantial sum to Theresa with a note that read, "For the girl who had courage enough to run, and wisdom enough to stay." The money went into a savings account for the children's education, a practical investment in the future Theresa and Yates wanted to build. Victor Hollis died in prison in 1886, word reaching them through an impersonal notice in the Lincoln newspaper. Theresa felt no triumph at the news, only a distant sadness for a life wasted on cruelty and control. She said a prayer for his soul, and then turned her attention back to her own full, rich life, refusing to give him any more space in her thoughts. Thomas Turner, her father, reached out more frequently as years passed, his letters gradually warming from formal to almost affectionate. He expressed regret, though never quite apologizing directly, and sent gifts for his grandchildren he had never met. In 1887, he traveled to Ashford Creek to meet them, a visit that was awkward at first but gradually eased into something approaching reconciliation. He saw his daughter's happiness, the respectful partnership of her marriage, and acknowledged quietly that he had been wrong to try to force the engagement to Victor. "You chose well," he told Yates during that visit, standing on the porch overlooking the prosperous ranch. "Better than I ever could have chosen for her. You have given her a good life." "She made this life as much as I did," Yates replied, "maybe more. Everything we have built here we built together." Thomas nodded slowly. "That is how it should be. I wish I had understood that sooner." By 1890, the Thornton Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in the region. They employed 15 hands year-round, owned over 1,000 head of cattle and more than 50 horses. The house had been expanded twice, now a sprawling homestead with enough room for their growing family and the occasional visit from extended relations. Theresa's paintings hung in galleries in Omaha and Kansas City, earning recognition beyond the local mercantile. Daniel, now 17, was preparing to attend agricultural college in Lincoln, determined to bring modern ranching techniques back to the family operation. Sarah, 15, divided her time between helping her mother with the younger children and working with the horses, displaying a natural gift for training that impressed even the experienced hands. The twins, William and Grace, were rambunctious 7-year-olds who kept everyone on their toes with their schemes and adventures. On a summer evening in 1891, Theresa and Yates celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary much as they had celebrated their 5th, sitting on the porch watching their children play in the fading light. Yates had gray threading through his dark hair now, and lines creased his face from years of squinting into prairie sun and wind. Theresa's own hair showed silver strands, and her hands bore calluses from years of work alongside the marks of paint and charcoal. 18 years, Yates marveled, his hand finding hers with the easy familiarity of long habit. "Sometimes I still cannot believe you said yes when I asked you to marry me. I was offering you an escape, not knowing I was really asking for my own salvation." "Salvation?" Theresa questioned, though she smiled. "I was just existing before you, going through the motions of building something without really knowing why. You gave me purpose beyond just survival. You gave me a reason to build a future, not just a livelihood." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "You gave me love, real love, the kind that grows stronger with time instead of fading. That is salvation, Theresa." "We saved each other," she said softly. "I ran from cruelty and found kindness. I fled from control and found partnership. I escaped a forced engagement to a cruel man, and you married me before he could object, giving me the freedom to choose my own life. That choice brought me here, to this family, to this love. I would not change a single moment, even the hard ones." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, their children's voices gradually quieting as exhaustion won over excitement. Lucas and Catherine walked over from their house, Catherine carrying a pie she had baked for the anniversary celebration. Jack and Tom, now aging but still loyal, tipped their hats as they headed to the bunkhouse after a long day's work. This was the life Theresa Turner had never dreamed possible in that Lincoln parlor 18 years ago. This was what lay on the other side of fear, beyond the desperate flight into unknown territory. Not just survival, but genuine thriving. Not just escape, but a home built on love and respect and partnership. Yates pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him mixed with leather and prairie grass and home. Their story had begun with desperation and danger, with a marriage of convenience that defied convention. But it had grown into something extraordinary, a love story that proved the best romances were not always the ones that began with passion, but rather the ones that built passion from trust, respect, and genuine partnership. "I love you," she said into the gathering darkness. "More today than yesterday, and less than I will tomorrow." "And I love you," he replied, his voice warm with contentment and promise. "Today and every day for the rest of our lives together." The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of summer and the promise of harvest. Inside the house, lamps were being lit, casting warm, golden light through the windows. Their family was gathering for the evening meal, for laughter and stories and the simple joy of being together. This was happiness, Theresa thought. Not the absence of difficulty, but rather the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. She had run from Lincoln seeking freedom, and she had found it here in the arms of a cowboy who had married her to save her and ended up saving himself in the process. Their story was not the conventional romance of society balls and formal courtship. It was better. It was real, built on honest need and mutual respect that had blossomed into profound love. It was the story of two people who took a chance on each other and discovered that sometimes the best partnerships are forged in the crucible of necessity and tempered with time into unbreakable bonds. As they rose to go inside, Yates took her hand one more time, squeezing gently. "Ready for another 18 years?" he asked with a smile. "Ready for 50 more," she replied without hesitation. "However many we are blessed with as long as we are together." They walked into their home, into warmth and light and the beautiful chaos of their family, leaving the darkness outside where it belonged. Behind them, the Nebraska prairie stretched vast and wild under an infinite sky, witness to their love story and guardian of all the years yet to come.